welcome back, everybody. Week 5 recap. And we're going to keep this one short and sweet today. There's a few things we just need to cover to be sure that we're ready. The first thing is we should know our tuning really well now. My dog has fleas. Be sure that you're getting that kind of sound out of your ukulele every time. And be sure that you take time to tune before you start playing. If you just start picking up playing, say, hey, let's learn a C chord, you might get something that sounds kind of funny, and it might not sound exactly right. Be sure everything is in tune before we start. And so I did that before I started the video. So I am tuned. So I'm ready to go here. So first of all, strumming. Remember our 3 ways of doing it. One way is using the thumb. That's perfectly fine to use that. The pointer finger, if you're going to do that way, or the rooster. However you want to strum, that's fine. One thing I didn't really talk about before was where to strum on the instrument. You might notice when I do it, I'm up in front of the hole. I think that's the sweet spot of the instrument. That's where it sounds the best. So when you're strumming, come up here to do that. And also, I kind of hold the instrument with my forearm when I play. And that's just kind of where my hand lays. If I go back here to the center of the hole, then my wrist is having to hold the ukulele, and it feels a little funny. So it just works better here. Sounds better. It's more comfortable on my arm to hold it that way. Okay, so cover some strumming, cover tuning. Now let's jump right into the meat of this thing, right? We did C chord 2 weeks ago. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. There it is. That's our C chord. The quickest way to sound really good on ukulele, just play a C chord and strum that thing, right? And and last week we learned the F chord, finger 1, fret 1 of the E string, right? And finger 2, fret 2 of the G string to get that F chord. So 2 chords, we have C and F, and those chords work really well together, but today we're going to add a 3rd chord, and that 3rd chord is the G7 chord. G7, not because we have to cover up with 7 fingers or something like that. It's called that because of the way chords are made. The bottom note of a chord is the 1, and then the second note up of the chord is called the 3rd. And the 3rd note up of the chord is called the 5th. And then if we add a 4th note, it's the 7th. So it's the odd numbers, right? 1, 3, 5, 7. And without getting too complicated, a 7th chord has a certain kind of feeling, a certain kind of pull that it has. I explained it on our class on Tuesday, like a sneeze, right? And a sneeze has a ah and a choo. It wants to resolve itself, right? It has 2 parts. And the G7, that's the G7 right there. And then it kind of wants to resolve to one of those, right? And it just to make it feel better. That was a C chord I played at the end. So G and C, that's like the ah and the choo of the sneeze. So those chords work really, really well together. So let's jump right in and see how we make a G7 chord. And a G7 is a triangle shape. It's going to be the 2nd fret of the A string right here. It's going to be the 1st fret of the E string. And it's going to be the 2nd fret of the C string. So 1, 2, 3. And to cover that, what I do is I put finger 2 on fret 2 of the C string. So it's kind of like on the F chord, I've just moved over a string to the C. I was here on the G for the F chord, but now I'm moving to this one. And this one is the same as the F chord. So now these are right together. So there's some similarities right there. So F chord is here, G7 I'm coming to here. Now this is where people get really tripped up a little bit with the G7 chord because they say, I can't make my fingers do that. Well, you're going to take finger 3, your ring finger, you can see they have the ring on it, and I'm going to put that on fret 2 of the A string. I tucked it under there. Now, to me, that feels pretty natural, but I remember when I first started doing this, I was like, oh, I can't get my finger to go in there. That's totally normal. You're going to feel like that. But here's one trick to make it work. Bring your elbow out. Bring that elbow out, and you're going to find that there's magically more room for that ring finger to fit in there. And so when that's in there, you have the G7 chord. The G7 chord by itself sounds kind of funny, kind of lonely, kind of like it wants to do something, right? Like we were talking about earlier. Well, here's the trick. That ring finger we're struggling with, you're going to take that ring finger and slide it up one fret. And guess what? Look at that. C chord. That's all I had to do. It was here. And I did that. And I slid right up to it. G7 to C. If you can get those two chords, my goodness, there are so many songs that you can play with G7 and C. Those two chords are like bread and butter. They get along really, really well. They're like good buddies. They can't have one without the other. G7. Hearing a G7 by itself is like going, happy birthday to you. Right, you want to finish it up. So with that G chord, work on getting some speed going back and forth from the G7 to the C. Now, it's probably looking pretty easy with me doing it. It will not feel easy at first. This is probably the trickiest thing that we've done so far. G7 to C, G7 to C, back and forth. Okay, sit in your room. You know, you might have a book or doing something, but hold that ukulele up, you know, while you're studying or something, and just practice going back and forth from that G7 to that C, G7 to C, back and forth over and over and over again till you don't need to look at it. And that's the big thing with ukulele. This isn't designed for you to be able to see the fretboard, okay? It's designed for you to feel the fretboard, not to see it. If you're playing this way, well, you're having to turn your wrist very unnaturally like this, and that's not good. We don't want that. So be sure that you're keeping that wrist not completely straight, but just slightly bent. So it's comfortably bent. And you don't want to be able to be looking at these chords all the time. Now, if you want to practice in front of a mirror, that works. Like right now, I'm recording in front of the phone, and that's helping me because I can see exactly where my fingers are. And that's nice, too. If you want to turn on your phone, just put it on selfie mode. You don't have to actually record or anything. But to do that and use it as a mirror, or just go old school and just find a mirror in the house and practice in front of that. So that is G7. G7 is the triangle. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is some songs we did this week. We did a song called Three Little Birds. And Three Little Birds, when you look at it on YouTube, and that I'm going to share the link to that in our resources, it has a chord called a G chord. Notice that's different, right? G is different than G7. And when you see a chord like that, for where we are right now and what we know, you can substitute a G7, and that's totally fine. So just because it says G, don't worry about it. You can play a G7, and it'll sound okay. So don't worry about that. So, like I said, that's about all I got today. Work on Three Little Birds. Also, we're coming up on Mother's Day, and last week, I gave you that song, right? And You Are My Sunshine. And so with the C and the F, that one has a G7 in it as well. But you don't have to use that G7. I know this is still brand new stuff. But if you want to learn You Are My Sunshine, go back and watch the video for week 4. And that has the instructions on how to play that. So anyway, guys, we're reaching the 10-minute mark here. And so I'm about to sign off. And guys, I hope you have a great weekend. Keep strumming. Keep getting better. Keep practicing, guys. All right, I'll see you on Tuesday. Bye.